Hello, my name is Yuan, founder and CEO of Daily Surprises Media, a lead generation agency for coaches and service providers that has generated over 100 client wins just last year alone. And in today's video, we are going to talk about how to make massive sales on Instagram, especially how do you actually leverage Instagram DM to do it. And before you get in panic, we're not talking about cold messaging or massive DMs, that's kind of copy and paste messages. No, none of that icky way of selling. We're actually talking about how do you have more authentic sales conversation so that you actually can have more sales, make massive sales on your Instagram, even with a small audience. If that's something you're interested in, make sure you keep watching. But before I actually dive into today's video, the first thing is to pause this video because I want you to go to the description box below right now and download the free workbook. The free workbook that actually goes along with this video training to making sure that you're getting the most out of this training. Have you got your workbook? Okay, let's get started. Before we actually get into the really juicy tactical bits on what you can actually do to get more sales DM conversations, the first thing I really want to talk about is almost like a mythbuster, right? Because when I talk about getting massive sales on Instagram, getting more DM sales conversation, what going to a lot of people's brain in general is like, they're like, okay, so I need to have more DM conversations, which is true. But the action at the back of it is they actually go out, end up looking for new ideal clients on Instagram, interact with their stories, and then try to get their attention and get into kind of audience growth mode. Well, that strategy is not wrong if you're in the phase of trying to grow your audience. It is definitely not the quickest way to make massive sales on your Instagram right now. If you're in the phase of launching, or if you're in the phase of, you have few spots for your service, you want to sell it as soon as possible, the quickest way really is to making sure that you focus your energy on your warm leads versus trying to get cold leads onto your profile and trying to convert them. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's always quicker and easier to convert the warm leads than convert the cold leads. And the reason why I want to talk about this right now is that's actually where our focus is today, to making sure that you can identify who's your warm leads and actually have conversation with them. We want to work smarter, not harder. So how do I actually have more conversation with our warm leads? Well, there's two ways you can do it. The way you can think about it is you have outbound DM conversation and inbound DM conversation. Outbound conversation means the conversation that you actually started with your ideal clients, who is already warm leads, who is already in your community right now. Whereas inbound sales conversation is when your warm leads reach out to you first and asking you about your services. Feels that too good to be true? Let me show you a screenshot on the screen right now and show you that there's tons of people actually reaching out to me. And that's how I get my business on Instagram, is they directly reaching out asking about my package and my price. So how do I do that exactly? Let's talk about how do I leverage inbound sales conversation to make massive sales on Instagram. There are many ways to actually leverage this, but the core way I do this is through content that actually converts. So I'm really focusing on my content to making sure that I provide value, I generate interest, and then I have a very strong call to action at the end. So the flow I use is following my second step in my 4-step UN framework, which is uncover the gap type of content. And I'm going to give you an example right here. So I know a lot of my clients, when they first getting started on Instagram, they know hashtag is important, but they don't quite understand how do they get started, right? So a lot of times what they do is actually copy and paste competitor hashtag, hoping that it will perform for them. And what they will realize over time is actually doesn't really perform because hashtag strategy is really personalized, right? So for my content, I can just highlight that. I can mention that, you've been copy and pasting competitor hashtag, hoping that it will work well for you. But then when you check your data insight, you realize that you're reaching literally 0 people through your hashtag. So what went wrong here? Straight away, that is my framework where I generate the interest. I talk about where they are, where they want to be, right? So I get their interest for them to keep reading that post. So I will then list out a few things that actually impact their hashtag performance and why it actually impact their hashtag performance so that I establish the trust and authority there, and they actually can connect dots now and knowing exactly what they need to focus on in order to improve their hashtag performance. Call to action, I would say, if your hashtag performance is not where you want to be right now, then definitely DM me the word hashtag to get my free hashtag guide, where I would have a checklist for you to making sure that you know exactly what you need to consider when it comes to establish a personalized hashtag strategy. So I know that when my clients read a post like that, they're very, very likely to reach out because they really care about their Instagram platform performance, which is why they're really invested in finding out resources that I can help them. So when they actually reach out, I'm going to put a screenshot somewhere on the screen right now so you can see that I have different opt-ins, and my ideal client was actually reaching out and do the exact call to action I tell them to in order to get my opt-ins or get a free strategy call with me. So that's how I start a conversation with warm leads, right? So that's inbound conversation, because my ideal clients would do call to action and ask on the post. So they would say hashtag, and then I will send them a link. I would just continue the conversation. It's very natural, right? So I'll be like, okay, so like, why do you think your hashtag's not working? And what is your biggest challenge right now on Instagram? So I can help them to give them some more tips on how they can improve their Instagram game. And on the back of that, I can also invite them to a sales call, and that's where I normally convert my followers into clients. So that really is my sales flow, is to really leverage my content to do content marketing for me, to get those inbound sales messages, and making sure that I get them into a deeper conversation so that they get to the conversion point and we can jump on a call and help them to decide if my service is right for them. Now that you know how I actually leverage inbound sales conversation, how do I generate those in order to have massive sales on Instagram, let's talk about outbound sales conversation, because that's something you actually have control over and how many of those you can have every single day, every single week. So what is outbound sales conversation? As we mentioned in the introduction of this video, we're not talking about those cold pitching messages or those massive copy and paste messages. What we do is really authentic sales, and also we're not reaching out to a random cold leads out there, right? So we're talking to our warm leads. So how do we do that? There are many, many ways you can do this, which I actually cover in my Instagram client attraction bootcamp. But for today's purpose, because we have limited time, I'm going to give you 2 ways right now that you can really accelerate your growth and have more outbound sales DM conversation. So the first one is to leverage Instagram story poll. So an example of that could be you're doing a sales training or whatever other training you do within your niche. So as the example, use myself as example again, I can do a training on how to actually grow an audience on Instagram that is engaged and that's likely to convert, right? So after I do a very small kind of mini theory on my stories, I would constantly leverage in poll within those stories and ask my audience, does this make sense? Yes or no? And what are you doing right now? Are you doing this right now? Does this make sense? Yes or no? Do you already leverage this strategy? Yes or no? So that's already a very natural point where if they select yes or no, I can just go back to my story analytics and I can straight away and continue that conversation. No matter if they said yes or no, it's a very straightforward kind of sales conversation entry point, right? So that's where a lot of people get stuck, because if they go out and reach out to a cold leads, they interact with the stories, a lot of times what happens, they stuck in that small chats forever. Whereas if you leverage my method here, you're already into a DM conversation that's kind of leading towards sales straight away, right? Because they're interacting with your tutorial, which shows that they have interest in growing their Instagram, and that's something that you can help them with, right? Just my example, obviously that will be a little bit different from you depending on what strategy or training you put out there, but the concept is exactly the same, right? So you want to put some sort of tutorial out there, kind of mini series, just a few stories, and making sure that you have interactive posts in between, and making sure that you always go back to your story analytics and really follow up with everyone who actually voted on your story and continue that conversation. So again, quite similar to the inbound sales conversation. It's almost like inbound, but they don't really show up in your DM directly because it's on your stories, right? So you can just say, hey, thank you so much for voting. I can see that you're, for example, not using this strategy yet. I'm really curious, what strategy are you using right now to making sure you have visibility? Stuff like that can really help you to already start and figuring out where your ideal audience is and how can you help them to achieve what they want. So that's the first way you can actually accelerate and have more outbound sales conversation. And the second way you can have more outbound sales conversation is again leveraging your stories, but actually not necessarily posts. I don't know about you, but I realize that whenever I'm on Instagram stories, I always have, I guess, two category of audience. Ones that really engaging with me. Whenever I have a sticker on there, they always interact with it. And I have another set of audience who are just silent lurkers. I can see that they're just always there watching, but they don't necessarily taking any actions. They don't necessarily even give me likes on the post or comments on the post, which is fine because we all have silent lurkers out there, but amazing mailing supporters nonetheless. So how do you actually draw them out? That's actually the other thing I leverage in order to boost up my outbound DM conversation. So what I would normally do is, obviously I don't do this like the first time somebody watch my stories. I normally, kind of watch who's watching my stories. If somebody's watching my stories consistently over a period of time and there's somebody new just joining my audience community recently, what I would normally do is just reach out directly and say, hey, I can see that you're watching my tutorial. Thank you so much for your support. I would love to get some feedback from you. Do you find this tutorial helpful? Is there any other trainings that you're interested in, so I can making sure I create content that interests you? Right? So again, you're starting off a DM conversation in a way that's already in the sales conversation, rather than having some small talks, like today's weather is good, your dog's beautiful. All of that are wonderful. But if your goal right now is to make massive sales on Instagram quickly, small DM chat doesn't really get you there, right? So we really want to making sure that we have very efficient sales DM conversation. So that's how you do it, is to go out and almost like call out your silent lurkers and, go out of your way and to support them, right? So this is a great way for you to connect with your audience, because regardless of they actually turn into clients or not, you already have an idea what they're struggling with. That's amazing market research data nonetheless. And that is my second way of making sure that I can increase the number of sales DM conversations I'm having on a weekly basis. At this point of video, you've already learned number one, why go out, find a new audience, interact with the stories is not the quickest way for you to make massive sales on Instagram. Number two, what you can do to increase the number of inbound sales conversations you have in your DMs. And number three, the two tricks that can help you to boost your outbound sales conversation every single week. While you're waiting for next week's video, making sure that you check out the video on the screen right now, where I talk about the framework, how we actually write content that actually converts, which I covered a little bit in this video. And that is going to really help you to get more and more of those sales inbound DM conversations into your inbox. Thanks for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.